And I want to play, and I want to actually set this up because this has to do with this Trump clip that we're about to play. I completely agree, even to the point of like happily smacking myself on the wrist, that this overall frame of Trump as a fascist and as an unparalleled authoritarian and all of this has been in the main hugely unhelpful, has empowered some trash politics, has been, embarrassing and ineffective and everything else. And at the same time, guess what? Motherfucker gave an objectively fascist speech last night, and Washington, D.C. is under military control, essentially. So I want to play this, but I also want to use it as an example of, my own wanting to sort of move with the currents versus just saying, well, actually, it's bad. But if you look at, what Obama did, it's like, yes, of course. And this is an escalation. Anyways, this is Donald Trump last night, and I'll throw to you, man.
The riots and lawlessness that has spread throughout our country. We will end it now. Today, I have strongly recommended to every governor to deploy the National Guard in sufficient numbers that we dominate the streets. Mayors and governors must establish an overwhelming law enforcement presence until the violence has been quelled. If a city or state refuses to take the actions that are necessary to defend the life and property of their residents, then I will deploy the United States military and quickly solve the problem for them. First, we are.
Matt.
Yeah.
Thoughts. Thoughts, actions, anything. But I mean, I think that was I just want to say, I think that was, this is what I mean by a certain fluidity. I think that was a step. And I think that we cannot allow all of the stupidity and the melodrama that has happened in the last several years around resistance discourse and elements of left discourse. This was different. I mean, it's on a continuum, but it's an escalation, I think.
It is an escalation. And I mean, obviously Trump is a particularly lurid and grotesque figurehead for this moment, but and I think that has its use. But I think at the same time, it's pretty clear what strikes me, both seeing Trump, not just at that speech, but more the leaked call to the governors, which David Roth very aptly compared to a guy calling into Mike Francesca to complain about the Yankees lineup or something. He just seems like he's yelling at the TV. And then you have these mayors and governors also just kind of it seems like everyone is at the mercy of the only institutions in the cities and in the country that have the funding and legitimacy and actually haven't been completely auctioned off to private interests, which are the cops in the cities and then the military. And I think that what we're seeing is that mask slipping further and further, and that a guy like Trump stands in for a system as opposed to really directing it. And I just, everyone, the fact that the police is the last sort of institution in the country to have any kind of popular legitimacy is genuinely unnerving to me, and it seems like the most dangerous current happening, more so than anything having to do specifically with Trump.
I think you could argue the only institutions that actually properly work right now are the Fed and the military.
Yeah,
on a federal level.
Yes.
Yeah, that's well, and I'm in 2016. There's this essay by Achille Mbembe, the Cameroonian philosopher, called "The Age of Humanism is Ending," and he basically charted like Palestine is the future for a sort of like global underclass, including recently in the United States, and that absolutely happened before Trump was elected. It's the old symptom or cause thing, which is another sort of like dead end that people still can't seem to get out of.
Yes. Yeah, I mean that's
yeah.
the what and what really heartens me is, and I know a lot of a lot of leftists would rather not, are resistant to endorse this whole movement because they don't think that it intersects enough with capitalism, right? It is too specifically and narrowly focused on racism and policing. But
Right.
I think once again that's talking yourself out of noticing what's in front of you, because like a demand to radically reduce police funding or take away their guns or things like that, that is not compatible with the capital hyperaccumulation in America's cities. It completely isn't. Like it might be framed as like a racial justice thing, but in practice, the reason the cops are like this, the reason they're the only line item in a municipal budgets to go up every year while everything else shrinks, is because they're filling the gap left by the collapse of any kind of social order with police coercion. And it doesn't work without that. It can't work without that. And so not only can the tip of the spear of a broader conflict with capitalism, I was out there tonight and just seeing the wildly diverse group of people protesting, that the opportunity exists for a lot of the suspicion and lack of connection between struggles within different communities that is reproduced by the stratification and the segregation of physical space in cities. This is a chance to actually break it down. This is a chance to actually display for each other across a chasm of like sort of mutual disengagement and mistrust, a commitment to one another that can be built upon.
Yeah, no, and it's the same dynamic, the new thought, the new form. Like, we're going to get post woke from going there and doing this.
Right. Yeah. Like the woke trap is caused by the anxiety of guilt, the anxiety of helplessness, the fact that you're not doing anything except having opinions. And so those opinions have to be razor sharp and have to be hysterically held to, and witch hunts have to be conducted to purify, because of the basic sense of guilt and anxiety that powers them. And those feelings melt away when you aren't just mouthing things, when things aren't just on your computer and in your mouth, when they're in your actual life. All of a sudden, you don't feel the need to reaffirm beliefs because you're actually doing something about them.
Yes, as the Korean Zen slogan stolen by Nike, just do it.
Yes.
I'll keep hammering it. Yeah, so no, I love that. And then I remember I was like, I don't fucking know, but I was at a World Bank protest when I was 16 or something. And I remember this, it was beautiful because this was in my deep and earnest sympathy for hippies right now. This guy who literally smelled of patchouli. And we were like marching up a street, and nowhere near as intense as this, but there absolutely were people, the cops were in riot gear, people were getting beaten up. That was definitely happening. Compared to this, it looks like a picnic, but the trajectory was very defined, even from the, so-called anti-globalization protests. And I remember this guy being like, see, man, we all love each other. And we're like, we can figure it out. And they've only got fear. And I think I left kind of like, yeah, sure. Okay, whatever, dude. Now I look back on it, I'm like, yeah, you nailed it, actually.
Yeah. But the thing that, and the reason that I think people have a justified leeriness about this sort of actionism is that things tend to peter out. That's the nature. You have momentum, you have a steam, and then things. But a lot of the things that cause these things to peter out, namely, people have to go to work. People have the feeling that they have something to lose. They have some sort of investment in these institutions that leads them to not want to see too dramatic a conflict with the state. Those things have fallen apart for basically everyone, and it all happened quietly. It all happened during that under the surface during that quarantine period, and I don't think any of us were aware of just how much radical alienation was occurring because I know that the cops did most of the smashing and burning in Minneapolis. Of course they did. They love that because it gives them, they think it's going to give them permission to smash everything, and they think it's going to scare everybody back home because, oh, whoa, we didn't want it to get out of hand. But instead what happened is people said, oh, you can burn down a police station? Let's see if we can do that. Because the things that in the past kept people home, kept people from trying to reproduce that kind of escalated conflict are gone. And I don't think that the police really understand that because they still have their jobs. And
they're still some of the only people in the country working. I mean, as actually one of the women, who led a march chant the other day when I was out was like, basically, I mean, that was a great talk about material showing up. We're paying your overtime. We are literally paying your fucking overtime.
You just watched a Michael Brooks show video. Subscribe to get them all. Why wouldn't you? Don't be foolish. Click subscribe below and become a patron as well. Patreon.com/TMBS. Thanks, everybody.